The First Greco-Persian War. The Aegean world stood on the brink of war. In the east, a vast empire prepared to impose its will. In the west, a collection of fiercely independent city-states faced a challenge greater than any they had known. What began as distant uprisings and diplomatic defiance had escalated into open conflict. A king, intent on retribution, turned his armies toward Greece. Divided though they were, the Hellenes would soon have to decide, stand together or fall alone. This was the first clash in a struggle that would shape the course of history. Chapter 1. Seeds of Conflict. The Persian Empire and the Greek World. At the dawn of the 5th century BC, two civilizations stood on a collision course. In the east, the Persian Empire, vast and disciplined, sought expansion and stability. In the west, the Greek city-states, fiercely independent and often divided, resisted subjugation. Their confrontation, later known as the First Persian Invasion of Greece, was not a sudden event, but the result of years of growing tensions, political maneuvering, and ideological differences. The Persian Empire, under Darius I, was young but already formidable. Its borders stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean, encompassing an array of cultures and peoples. Darius, having seized power after a period of internal strife, understood that maintaining control required both stability and expansion. The empire's sheer size made it inherently volatile, with frequent uprisings testing its authority. Darius believed continued conquest would reinforce Persian dominance and deter rebellion. His western campaigns reflected this strategy. He pushed into Thrace, advanced beyond the Danube, and brought Macedonia under Persian influence. Though nominally a Persian vassal, Macedonia retained some autonomy, a lingering issue for imperial control. These efforts expanded Persian reach and sent a clear message: resistance was futile. The Greek world, in contrast, was politically fragmented. City-states, or polis, operated independently, bound by common language and traditions, but divided by rivalries. There was no unified Greece, only a collection of competing powers, each safeguarding its sovereignty. However, a shared value distinguished the Greeks from the Persians: self-governance. While some city-states leaned toward oligarchy or tyranny, many embraced early forms of democracy, a stark contrast to the autocratic rule of the Great King. Greek cities along the coast of Asia Minor, known as Ionia, had lived under Persian rule since the conquests of Cyrus the Great. Economically prosperous, they nevertheless chafed under Persian-appointed tyrants who ruled in the empire's interests rather than their own. Discontent simmered beneath the surface, awaiting the right spark. That spark came with a failed Persian expedition against the island of Naxos. The campaign, led by the Persian satrap Artaphernes and the Milesian tyrant Aristagoras, was a disaster. In its aftermath, Aristagoras, fearing for his position, renounced his tyranny and declared Miletus a democracy. His bold move set off a chain reaction. Other Ionian cities followed suit, overthrowing Persian-backed rulers and asserting their independence. The Ionian Revolt had begun. Aristagoras, knowing the Ionians alone could not withstand Persian retaliation, sought allies in mainland Greece. His appeals met mixed reactions. Many city-states hesitated to provoke the empire, but Athens and Eretria chose to intervene. Their support, though limited, was a defining moment. It was more than an act of aid. It was a statement of defiance against Persian dominion. The Ionian Revolt quickly became more than a regional uprising. It embodied a larger struggle, one between imperial control and the Greek ideal of self-rule. Darius saw it as an existential threat, a challenge to his authority that could not go unanswered. Crushing the revolt was not merely about reclaiming lost territory. It was about demonstrating that rebellion, anywhere within the empire, would not be tolerated. Thus, the seeds of conflict were sown. What began as a rebellion on the fringes of the Persian Empire would escalate into a war that would shape the future of Greece and the wider Mediterranean world. The confrontation between East and West was inevitable. and the first great test of Greek resilience was about to begin. Chapter 2: The Athenian Gambit, Democracy and Defiance. By the late 6th century BC, Athens was undergoing a political transformation that would define its future and draw it into the conflict against Persia. The expulsion of Hippias in 510 BC, aided by Cleomenes, one of Sparta, created a power vacuum. Cleomenes sought to install a pro-Spartan tyranny under Isagoras, directly challenging the influence of Cleisthenes, a member of the powerful Alcmaeonid family. Cleisthenes, recognizing the need for a bold response, proposed a radical shift: democracy. Whether motivated by genuine belief or political necessity, he understood that empowering the people would make Athens resistant to foreign control. The Athenian populace embraced this newfound power, revolting against Isagoras and expelling the Spartan-backed forces. Cleisthenes was recalled from exile, and democracy took root, fostering a fierce commitment to self-rule and an aversion to tyranny in any form. Sparta did not take this lightly. Cleomenes led an army against Athens, seeking to restore Isagoras, but failed. Facing this threat, the Athenians made an unexpected move. They sought aid from Artaphernes, the Persian satrap in Sardis. In exchange for assistance, he demanded the traditional tokens of submission: earth and water. Desperate, the Athenian envoys agreed. However, upon their return, public outrage led Athens to renounce the agreement, effectively placing it in opposition to Persia. The situation escalated when Cleomenes attempted to reinstate Hippias as Athens' ruler. When this too failed, Hippias fled to Sardis, urging the Persians to subjugate Athens. Artaphernes, unmoved by Athenian pleas to disregard Hippias, demanded his reinstatement. Athens refused, solidifying its stance against Persia. By resisting Persian influence, Athens had made itself an enemy of the empire. This defiant posture placed it in a unique position to support the Ionian Revolt, as the fledgling Ionian democracies mirrored the Athenian model. The Ionians, many of whom were descended from Athenian colonists, looked to their ancestral homeland for support. Eretria, another Greek city-state, also pledged aid. Though its exact motivations remain unclear, economic interests likely played a role, as Persian expansion threatened Eretrian trade routes. Herodotus suggests an additional reason: Eretria's gratitude to Miletus for past military support. Whatever the cause, Eretria joined Athens in dispatching 25 triremes to Asia Minor. This force launched a daring raid on Sardis, catching Artaphernes off guard and setting fire to the lower city. Though ultimately unable to hold their position and forced to retreat under Persian pursuit, the attack demonstrated Greek willingness to challenge the empire. The repercussions were immediate. Darius, enraged by Athenian and Eretrian defiance, vowed retribution. The Persian counteroffensive was swift. In 494 BC, the Battle of Lade crushed the Ionian Revolt, and by 493 BC, Persian rule had been reasserted across the Aegean. With Ionia subdued, Darius turned his attention westward. Athens and Eretria had defied him, and now they would face the consequences. The Persian invasion of Greece was no longer a question of if, but when. Chapter 3: Mardonius Campaign, a prelude to invasion. With the Ionian revolt suppressed and Athens and Eretria marked for retribution, Darius set in motion the first phase of his campaign to bring Greece to heel. In the spring of 492 BC, he appointed his son-in-law, Mardonius, to lead an expeditionary force. This was not merely a punitive strike, it was a strategic move to expand Persian dominance into Europe. Mardonius's campaign was twofold: to secure Persian control over the northern approaches to Greece and to bring the city-states of the mainland into submission. He began in Cilicia, where a fleet and land army were assembled. While his army advanced overland towards the Hellespont, Mardonius himself commanded the fleet along the coast of Asia Minor. His first objective was to stabilize Ionia. Surprisingly, he abolished the remaining tyrannies in the region and introduced democratic governments. perhaps a pragmatic move to pacify the region after the revolt. With Ionia secured, Mardonius led his forces across the Hellespont into Thrace. The Thracian tribes, never fully subdued by previous Persian campaigns, resisted but were ultimately forced into submission. Marching southward, the Persians entered Macedon, a kingdom that had been a vassal of Persia since the late 6th century BC. While Macedon had retained some autonomy, Mardonius sought to solidify Persian control, ensuring its loyalty. Meanwhile, the Persian fleet moved through the northern Aegean, subjugating the island of Thasos without resistance. However, disaster struck when the fleet attempted to navigate the treacherous waters around Mount Athos. A sudden and violent storm wrecked 300 ships and claimed 20,000 men, a severe blow to the campaign. Adding to the difficulties, the Persian land army was ambushed by the Brygians, a Thracian tribe. Mardonius himself was wounded in the attack. Despite this setback, he swiftly retaliated, crushing the Brygians and reasserting control over the region. With the fleet decimated and his forces weakened, Mardonius had little choice but to abandon further advances into Greece. He withdrew to the Hellespont, effectively ending the campaign. While it had fallen short of subduing Athens and Eretria, it had reinforced Persian dominance in Thrace and Macedon, and served as a clear warning to the Greeks. Persia's campaign against them had only just begun. Chapter 4. Diplomatic Maneuvers, Earth and Water. The dust had barely settled from Mardonius's campaign when Darius I, ever the astute strategist, turned his attention to diplomacy. He understood that military might alone could not secure his ambitions in Greece. The previous year's expedition, though partially successful, had also revealed the potential for Greek resistance. Darius sought to exploit the political divisions within the Greek world, hoping to isolate and subdue the more defiant city-states before launching a full-scale invasion. In 491 BC, Darius dispatched ambassadors to every Greek city-state, carrying a simple yet potent message: a demand for earth and water. This traditional Persian gesture symbolized submission, a recognition of the Persian king's supreme authority. For Darius, it was a means of gauging the resolve of the Greeks and identifying those who would willingly submit to his rule. The response to Darius's demands varied significantly across the Greek world. Many of the smaller city-states, intimidated by the sheer power of the Persian Empire, readily complied. They recognized the futility of resistance and sought to avoid the wrath of the Persian king. These acts of submission, though seemingly pragmatic, sowed seeds of discord within the Greek world, highlighting the deep divisions that existed between the city-states. However, two prominent city-states, Athens and Sparta, stood in stark defiance. Their responses to Darius's demands were not merely refusals, but acts of blatant hostility, signaling their unwavering commitment to resisting Persian domination. In Athens, the Persian ambassadors were brought before the Athenian assembly, where they were subjected to public trial. The Athenians, fueled by a potent mix of civic pride and defiance, condemned the ambassadors to death, executing them as enemies of the city. This act of extreme hostility was a clear message to Darius: Athens would not submit to Persian rule. In Sparta, the response was equally dramatic, albeit delivered with Spartan conciseness. The Spartan authorities, without any pretense of diplomacy, threw the Persian ambassadors down a well. This brutal act, a symbolic rejection of Persian authority, served as a powerful declaration of Spartan resolve. The actions of Athens and Sparta, though seemingly reckless, were driven by a profound sense of self-preservation. They understood that submission to Persia would mean the loss of their hard-won freedoms and the imposition of tyranny. The execution of the ambassadors in Athens and the brutal treatment of them in Sparta were not merely acts of defiance, they were acts of survival. These acts of defiance, however, also created a dangerous situation. Athens and Sparta, despite their historical rivalries, found themselves united in their opposition to Persia. This alliance, though fragile, marked a significant shift in the Greek political landscape, foreshadowing the united resistance that would ultimately confront the Persian invasion. However, Sparta was soon plunged into internal turmoil, complicating the delicate balance of power. The citizens of Aegina, an island city-state located in the Saronic Gulf, had submitted to the Persian ambassadors, raising concerns in Athens. The Athenians, fearing that Aegina would be used as a Persian naval base, appealed to Sparta for intervention. Cleomenes responded to the Athenian request by traveling to Aegina to confront the Aeginetans personally. However, the Aeginetans, seeking to protect their interests, appealed to Cleomenes' fellow king, Demaratus, who supported their stance. This division within the Spartan leadership threatened to undermine the fragile alliance between Athens and Sparta. Cleomenes responded by orchestrating the deposition of Demaratus. He bribed the priests at Delphi, the most influential oracle in Greece, to declare Demaratus illegitimate. This act of political maneuvering, though morally questionable, successfully removed Demaratus from power, replacing him with his cousin Leotychides. With a compliant co-king in place, Cleomenes was able to force the Aeginetans to capitulate, handing over hostages to the Athenians as a guarantee of their good behavior. However, Cleomenes' actions soon backfired. News of his bribery at Delphi spread throughout Sparta, leading to his expulsion from the city. Cleomenes, undeterred, sought to rally support in the northern Peloponnesus, threatening to destabilize the region. Faced with the prospect of civil war, the Spartans relented and invited him back to the city. However, by this point, Cleomenes was widely considered insane, and he was imprisoned, where he died the following day. He was succeeded by his half-brother, Leonidas I. The internal conflicts within Sparta, though seemingly unrelated to the Persian threat, had significant implications for the Greek response. The instability within Sparta and the brief period of weakened leadership created a window of opportunity for Persia to exploit the divisions within the Greek world. The diplomatic maneuvering of 491 BC, therefore, was not merely a prelude to war. It was a complex game of political chess, where the fate of Greece hung in the balance. Chapter 5. The Marathon Campaign, Datis and Artaphernes. The diplomatic maneuvering of 491 BC had laid bare the deep divisions within the Greek world, yet it had also revealed the unwavering resolve of Athens and Sparta. Darius I, undeterred by the defiant responses of these two powerful city-states, resolved to launch a punitive expedition aimed primarily at punishing Athens and Eretria for their insolence. Taking advantage of the chaos that had briefly gripped Sparta, effectively isolating Athens, Darius prepared to strike. In 490 BC, a substantial army was assembled in Susa, the Persian capital. This force, drawn from the far reaches of the vast Persian Empire, marched towards Cilicia, where a fleet had been gathered. Command of this expedition was entrusted to Datis the Mede and Artaphernes, son of the satrap Artaphernes, both seasoned commanders with considerable military experience. The composition of the Persian army was a testament to the empire's diverse nature. Herodotus, our primary source for these events, describes a great and well-furnished army, without providing a specific number. Later ancient sources, however, offer wildly varying estimates, ranging from 200,000 to 600,000 men. Modern historians, recognizing the limitations of these figures, generally dismiss them as exaggerations. Estimating the size of the Persian force is a complex undertaking. One approach involves calculating the number of marines carried by the Persian fleet, which Herodotus reports consisted of 600 triremes. If each trireme carried approximately 30 extra marines, in addition to their standard crew, the fleet could have transported between 18,000 and 26,000 infantry. This figure, though speculative, provides a more reasonable estimate than the inflated numbers offered by later sources. The Persian infantry was a heterogeneous group, drawn from across the empire, each contingent with its own distinct style of warfare. However, Herodotus notes a general conformity in their armor and fighting style. They were typically armed with bows, short spears and swords, carrying wicker shields and wearing leather jerkins. The ethnic Persian troops, however, may have been better equipped, wearing corselets of scale armor. The elite contingents of the Persian infantry, included the ethnic Persians, Medians, Scythians, and Sarka. These troops, renowned for their skill and discipline, formed the core of the Persian army. The Persian style of fighting typically involved standing off from the enemy, using bows to wear down their defenses before closing in for the final assault with spears and swords. The Persian cavalry, though smaller in number, was also a formidable force. Estimates range from 1,000 to 3,000 horsemen, primarily drawn from the ethnic Persians, Bactrians, Medes, Scythians, and Saka. These cavalrymen, often lightly armed and highly mobile, were adept at harassing enemy formations and exploiting weaknesses in their lines. The Persian fleet, consisting of 600 triremes, was a crucial component of the expedition. While Herodotus does not specify the number of transport ships, it is clear that they were essential for carrying the army and its supplies. The cavalry, in particular, would have required specialized transport ships, as Herodotus's claim that they were carried on the triremes is highly improbable. Once assembled, the Persian force set sail from Cilicia, heading towards the island of Rhodes. The Lindian Temple Chronicle records that Datis besieged the city of Lindos, but was ultimately unsuccessful. This initial setback, though minor, demonstrated the challenges that the Persians would face in their campaign. From Rhodes, the Persian fleet moved north along the Ionian coast, heading towards Samos, before turning westward into the Aegean Sea. Their next target was the island of Naxos, which had previously resisted Persian attempts at subjugation. The Persians, seeking to avenge this defiance, sacked the city and enslaved many of its inhabitants. The Persian fleet then proceeded to Delos, a sacred island in the Cyclades. The Delians, fearing the Persian advance, fled from their homes. However, Datis, seeking to demonstrate Persian clemency, sent a herald to the Delians, assuring them that they would not be harmed. He then burned 300 talents of frankincense on the altar of Apollo, showing his respect for the island's deity. From Delos, the Persian fleet continued its journey across the Aegean, island hopping towards Eretria. They took hostages and troops from each island they encountered, demonstrating their power and consolidating their control over the region. The Persians finally arrived off the southern tip of Euboea, at Charistos. The citizens of Charistos, refusing to submit to Persian demands, were besieged and their lands ravaged until they were forced to surrender. The Persian task force then sailed around Euboea, heading towards their primary target, Eretria. The Eretrians, divided amongst themselves regarding their response to the Persian threat, ultimately decided to remain in their city and face the siege. This decision would prove to be a fateful one, setting the stage for the next phase of the Persian campaign. Chapter 6. The Battle of Marathon, a defining moment. Eretria, a city on the island of Euboea, had earned the wrath of Darius I for its defiance. But the Eretrians were divided on how to face the threat. Some wanted to flee, others to endure a siege, and some even suggested submitting to the Persians. In the end, the majority chose to stay and defend their city, underestimating the Persians' resolve. For 6 days, the Persians laid siege to Eretria. On the 7th day, however, 2 Eretrian citizens betrayed their own city, either out of fear or greed, opening the gates to the Persians. The city fell swiftly. The Persians razed Eretria, looted its temples, and enslaved the remaining citizens, sending a grim warning to the rest of Greece about the consequences of defying the Persian king. With Eretria subdued, the Persian fleet turned toward Athens, guided by Hippias, the exiled Athenian tyrant. Hippias, eager to reclaim power, believed the Athenians, demoralized by Eretria's fall, would be easy prey. But the Athenians were far from cowed. They rallied their forces, including a small contingent from Plataea, and positioned themselves at Marathon, a plain 25 miles from Athens. There, they blocked the Persian army's 2 possible escape routes. At the same time, they sent Phidippides, their swiftest runner, to Sparta for aid. Phidippides' 140-mile run was an incredible feat, though he arrived during the sacred truce of Carnea, preventing the Spartans from marching immediately. They would not be able to assist until the full moon, which delayed their arrival by at least 10 days. Faced with this, the Athenians decided to confront the Persians without Spartan aid, bolstered by the arrival of the Plataean hoplites. For 5 days, both sides waited. The Athenians, though outnumbered, had a critical advantage. Their heavy infantry, the hoplites, were organized in the phalanx formation, which was devastating in close combat. The Persians, with their archers and light infantry, had less effectiveness in a direct fight. The decision to attack was a gamble. The Athenians recognized the necessity of stopping the Persians from establishing a base on the Attic coast. The hoplite phalanx charged the Persian lines with overwhelming force. The Persian wings were routed and their center collapsed. The Persians, unable to maintain their ranks, fled toward their ships. Herodotus reports that 6,400 Persian soldiers were killed, while the Athenians lost only 192 men and the Plataeans 11. Despite being outnumbered, the Greeks had proved their military superiority. After the battle, the Persian fleet attempted to land at Athens, hoping to strike while the Athenians were still at Marathon. However, the Athenians anticipated this move and rushed back to the city, preventing a Persian landing. The fleet, seeing their chance lost, returned to Asia. The Spartans arrived the next day, having marched 140 miles in 3 days. After touring the battle site, they paid their respects to the Athenians. The Battle of Marathon, though small in the grand context of Persian military history, was a decisive moment. It was the first significant Greek victory over the Persians, shattering their aura of invincibility. This victory boosted Greek morale and showed that resistance to Persia was not only possible, but could be successful. Marathon marked the beginning of Athens' golden age, forever changing the course of Greek history. To summarize, the first Persian invasion of Greece was the direct result of the Ionian Revolt and Darius' broader ambitions to extend and secure his empire. The revolt, sparked by the failed Naxos expedition and the rise of democratic movements in the Ionian cities, drew the attention of Athens and Eretria. These two city-states, united in their opposition to Persian rule, soon found themselves at the forefront of the struggle. Athens, having recently embraced democracy, saw the revolt as both a shared cause and an opportunity to challenge Persian power. Eretria, driven by commercial interests and historical alliances, also threw its support behind the Ionian cities. Their joint raid on Sardis, though ultimately unsuccessful, led to Darius's deep enmity and set the stage for the Persian retaliatory campaign. In 492 BC, Darius dispatched Mardonius to subdue Thrace and Macedon, aiming to assert Persian dominance in the region. While Mardonius achieved some success on land, his forces suffered a crippling defeat at sea due to a violent storm off Mount Athos. Undeterred, Darius turned to diplomacy in 491 BC, demanding earth and water from Greek city-states as a symbol of submission. Most smaller states complied, but Athens and Sparta defiantly refused, executing or mistreating the Persian ambassadors. This marked a decisive moment in Greek-Persian relations and set the stage for a more direct confrontation. In 490 BC, Darius launched a full-scale amphibious invasion, led by Datis and Artaphernes. After sacking Eretria, the Persians landed at Marathon, aiming to crush Athens. Despite being outnumbered and awaiting Spartan reinforcements, the Athenians won a stunning victory. The Battle of Marathon demonstrated the superiority of the hoplite phalanx and shattered the myth of Persian invincibility. The victory at Marathon, while a crushing blow to Persian ambitions, was only the beginning. It would fuel Athenian confidence and signal the rise of Athens as a major power. The battle also foreshadowed greater struggles to come, as Darius's desire to subjugate Greece remained unquenched, and his son Xerxes would later take up the mantle of his father's campaign. The events that followed Marathon would mark the beginning of a series of pivotal confrontations, reshaping the course of Greek and Persian history.